welcome everyone. And thank you for joining me for today's NAC at Home program. My name is David Zyla. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we're a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts and to educate the American public in the fine arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Following the conversation, we will have a brief Q&A, so please feel free to use the chat or Q&A feature for any questions that you might have. So today, I'm very excited to share that we are joined by Marcellas Reynolds, and I am going to tell you a little bit about him before we bring him on. So, obsessed with all things style, author and entertainment reporter Marcellas Reynolds is the author of Supreme Models, Iconic Black Women Who Revolutionized Fashion. Marcellas's career began with his discovery by legendary model agent Marie Anderson. For 7 years, he traveled the globe, shooting with fashion's most celebrated photographers and posing for most famous brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, and Nautica. It was modeling in New York where Marcellas discovered his true passion, wardrobe styling. Editorials for Amica, Grazia, and InStyle magazines, as well as advertising campaigns for Anheuser-Busch, H&M, and United Airlines soon followed. Styling celebrities Rebecca Hall, Sharon Stone, and Justin Timberlake led him to Hollywood and a career as an entertainment reporter and TV host. His on-camera credits include E! Live from the Red Carpet, Good Morning America, Daily Mail TV, Good Day LA, and The Tamron Hall Show. And his editorials include British GQ, British Vogue, and Elle. Please help me welcome Marcellas Reynolds.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Fantastic. We are so excited to meet you and to hear all about these iconic women who have just impacted fashion in such a profound way. So I'm going to ask you to take it away.
Okay, I'll start, I guess. So I'm Marcellas Reynolds. I am a lover of so many things, but I'm a lover of fashion, first and foremost. I'm a lover of women. I guess that's weird to say, but I grew up. My mother was a single mother, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And my grandmother and grandfather were sort of these like pivotal figures in my life because they were very dapper. My grandfather wore suits and he wore pocket squares and he wore cardigans, and my grandmother wore furs. But my mother was sort of the direct opposite of them because she dressed up. Like she wore bell-bottom jeans with like t-shirts that said "Right On," and she wore like leather mini skirts. And I was always fascinated by fashion because it was such a big part of my life growing up. I love fashion. I got my first job in retail when I was 15. I lied because you're supposed to be 16 to get a job. And ever since then, I've worked in fashion in some way. In the mid-90s, I was discovered waiting tables, the typical like sort of model story by a famous agent who had discovered like Leah Cabede, Cindy Crawford, Colin Egglesfield, all these like incredible models. And she said that I should be a model. And I did it, and I never looked back. And it was like this learning curve that was so amazing modeling because I met so many incredible people in front of and behind the camera, from fashion editors like Candy Price, photographers like Bruce Weber, designers like Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger. I lived in London, I lived in Paris, I lived in Milan, I lived all over the world. Of course, I was a catalog boy, so I lived in Miami. I worked in like Dallas. I always went back to my hometown, Chicago, and I just love the business of fashion. But the one thing I love more than anything about fashion, and don't get me wrong, I love the photographers, the makeup artists, the hairstylists, everything about fashion. I love the models. Having been a model, I understand the dreams that you attach to it. And I met so many incredible women along the way that are still to this day like some of my closest friends. And so this book, Supreme Models, which I happen to have right here, is sort of my love letter to fashion, my love letter to the Black women who raised me. And it's also my love letter, I think, to every little girl, no matter what race she is, that has stepped out in faith and decided that she wanted to be a model. So today I just want to talk to you about the book and my experiences and what drove me to create this this first ever art book devoted exclusively to top Black models. So I guess since the cover is up, David, let's talk about the cover. The model on the cover of the book is Janelle Williams, a really exciting model. And I always say to people, when you look at the book, it's like you can open it to any page and there's something like beautiful and there's something interesting. But because I'm the author of the book and the editor of the book, ultimately, every photo, every image has a story behind it. And the story behind this photo is, there's so many stories, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. But here's the deal. So Abrams, who published the book, asked me to send them 10 photos they thought I would like to be the cover of the book. And for me, it was like Sophie's choice because I had lived with all these photos. And at one point we had considered, my photo editors and I had considered, there was literally thousands of photos that at one point had been considered to be inside the book. And each photo was very personal to me for whatever reason. I might have loved the photographer. I might have loved the model. I might have loved the styling in it. I might have loved the hair and the makeup. So it was very hard to come up with 10 photos. And ultimately, I came up with 9 photos that I thought should be on the cover. And that was really important because the cover is the first thing you see, and that sells the book to people that don't know anything about the book. And so the cover was incredibly important. And I had, at one point, it was like, I had like 2 or 3 pictures of Naomi Campbell in the mix, a beautiful picture of Leah Kabidi. And if you have the book, the photo of Naomi that I was considering for the cover is also in the book. And the photo of Leah that made the book is in the book. And then there was a beautiful photo of Iman from back in the day when Iman was like Iman, out of Africa, just arrived in the United States. And I couldn't come up with the 10th photo, but the photo that's on the cover was always one of my favorite photos because to me, she looks like a work of art. She looks like Erte. And I love how dark her skin is. And I love the fact that she doesn't have any hair. And I had been sending and considering these photos that quite honestly had like lighter skinned models on them because I didn't want to sort of put anybody off by maybe putting a dark skinned woman on the cover. But I ended up putting this photo in at the last minute and sending them 10 because they asked for 10. And then a couple weeks pass, and then all of a sudden, this photo pops into my email program with the cover art on it. And the one line is, "Congratulations, here's the cover of your book." And I never for a second thought that this would be the photo that they choose. I definitely thought they would choose a Naomi photo or an Iman photo. There was even a Veronica Webb. I never told that story, but there was actually a photo of Veronica Webb in there that I was considering. And Veronica Webb wrote my foreword. And it was so important because the cover has struck a chord with so many people. I had a crazy conversation with my sister when the book first came out. She came to visit me in Chicago. We were doing a series of book events in Chicago. And she said to me, I can't believe you put a dark-skinned woman on the cover of the book. And I was like, why? And my sister is dark-skinned. She's darker than me. And she said, because growing up, I never thought I was pretty because I had dark skin. And I never thought that you thought I was pretty. But now because you did this, I see that you think I'm beautiful. And that will always resonate with me. All right, moving on. Okay, new picture. Okay, so this photo is Leomi Anderson. And what's really important about this photo is Leomi is not just a model, she's an activist. But what specifically I love about this photo is the fashion, first and foremost. I love that dress. I love the pink background. But this photo is one of the few photos in the book that were taken by a female photographer. And for me, being a Black man, being a gay man, being a member of the LGBTQI community, it was incredibly important that I find photographers of color and that I find female photographers and I celebrate them in this work. And I'll tell you something, it was incredibly hard. Fashion is a business that is dominated by men. Think about it. The names of the designers that we know roll off our tongue, and usually they're mostly male. The name of the photographers that we love, Peter Lindbergh, Stephen Meisel, Arthur Elgort, Patrick DeMarchelier, Testino, blah, blah, blah. Where's the women there? Where are the women? And so this is why this photo is incredibly important to me, because it's one of the photos that was taken by a female photographer who happens to be British. All right, next photo. This photo is everything. First and foremost, this is Georgie Badiel, the model. Georgie Badiel was a Black model that was discovered in Africa. She was actually a Miss Africa. And a lot of Black girls that come into modeling through Africa come in through beauty pageants. And she was one of them, one of the Miss Africas. A lot of top African models have been Miss Africas. But what is really amazing is Georgie did an interview with me, and I encourage you to read the interviews in the book because you learn so much. Georgie was a girl that lived in a village where the closest well to her family was 10 miles away. And her job, along with her grandmother, was every day to walk to the well to get water for her family. Can you imagine that? 10 miles in the burning sun. And then you fill the water bucket and you carry it on your head and you bring it back to your family. That's what you do to survive every single day. And Georgie was very successful in the early 2000s and used her fame to start a charity where she goes around to villages in Africa and she digs wells. And her book is called, she has a children's book, and the book is called The Water Princess. And she's just one of those incredible women that turned her pain into success and then used that success to change the lives of others. All right, let's move on. Tyra World. I could tell you so many stories about Tyra Banks. You have no idea. First of all, Tyra and I actually, when I came to LA to start my career in television, I did an episode of the Tyra Banks show when she was the host of, and it was Sweeps Week. And this sight gag was that all the women that were in the audience had to be wearing shorts or mini skirts. And so when Tyra comes out, she's wearing full-length pants. And then I'm like, Tyra, everybody here is wearing shorts and you're not. And I end up ripping off her pants because they were tearaway pants and throwing them in the air. And it just became this crazy moment because she had on short shorts under them. And we just sort of bonded ever since that moment. It was just so funny. And what's funny about this photo when I think about it is this is the single, other than the cover, this is the single most expensive photo in the book, right? I can quote to you how much every photo in the book cost. This is the single most expensive photo in the book. And originally, I'm gonna tell you some tea. Originally, I did not want this photo in the book. First and foremost, because it was so expensive, but the stylist in me did not want swimsuit photos in the book because I think that swimsuit photos are photos taken by men for men, and that's not fashion. But my editors at Abrams were insistent that we use this photo of Tyra because of what it represents. She's the first Black woman on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and that made history. This photo I love, and I'll tell you why about price. This photo I love. This is one of the, first of all, she's related to she's related to a basketball player, a pro basketball player. And I adore this model. But what I love about this photo is that when I said, this photo ran in Polish Vogue or Vogue Poland, one of the Vogues, I think it was Poland. But when I reached out to the photographer for this photo, and I love the big doors and the stairway behind her and the dress and her dark skin against all the white, the photographer was so honored that I would consider his work to be in this book that he gave me the photo for free. And that was so amazing because the photos in this book, the licensing fees were over $70,000 to clear the photos in this book. And to have somebody that is that successful be honored to be a part of something that I did, that was amazing. Okay, new photo. Oh! Ladies and gentlemen, the queen. This is the legendary, the iconic Pat Cleveland. Pat Cleveland, I don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to see it, Google her, search her on YouTube. You need to see her work the runway. Unlike anybody else in the world, she to me is one of the top runway models ever. She also had a very important print career. But what was really cool about Pat Cleveland in the 70s is she was one of the Halstonettes. And so she was one of Halston's girl posse. I love that. But what was even more important is she was one of the models that went to the Battle of Versailles and conquered Parisian fashion. I know you guys know about the 1973 Battle of Versailles, where 5 American designers went to Paris, and it was a charity event to restore the Palace of Versailles. And it was the French designers, the couturiers, against the American designers. And the American designers took like 30 models, 11 of which who were Black. Pat Cleveland was one of them. And they ended up winning this competition. But more importantly, that moment opened the door for the Black model in Europe, because it was the first time that designers and the press, European designers and European press, had seen that many Black models in one place. And the models moved and they brought the clothing to life, and each one had a personality. Not only did they open the door for Black models, but they changed the face of fashion because they changed the way that clothing was shown. Okay, next photo. All right, this is Rose Cordero, and Rose Cordero is Dominican. And one of the reasons why I really wanted Rose in the book was because there are tons of Afro-Latina models in the world, and they're always stunning, always beautiful. But one of the things that I had a very good friend who was an Afro-Latina model, and one of the things I learned from her was that racism and colorism are not just American conceits. They are as big in other countries as they are here. And if you're dark-skinned in Latin America and the Dominican Republic and other countries, it's still thought of as like not as good as someone who's light-skinned. So it was very important for me to put as many Afro-Latinas as I could into the book to represent that state, that place in beauty, to show that these girls have like opened the door, kicked the doors down, and combated racism, not just in the United States, but across the globe. And Rose is a beauty, and she's one of the covers that got away from me is she was one of the few Black models that have been There she is in action. Look at the leg. Look at her working and bringing that dress to life. Only a model can do that. Only a good model can do that and control her face and control the body. One of the most important things I think about Rose is that she was one of the few models of color to be on the cover of Vogue Paris. And I really wanted that photo and I couldn't clear it because the photographers would not let me. Sad for them. Anyway, let's move on. Listen, when I say to you that I love this woman, I am not exaggerating. This is the legendary Peggy Dillard. Peggy Dillard is the second Black woman to be on the cover of American Vogue. We know that the first Black woman is Beverly Johnson. Peggy Dillard's cover, okay, so in its 85 year, or was it 82 year, in its 82 year history, Vogue had never put a Black woman, American Vogue had never put a Black woman on its cover. I don't want to talk about that because I think Beverly Johnson's Vogue cover is coming up. So we'll talk about that in depth later. Peggy Dillard was the second Black woman on the cover of Vogue. And this issue, no, this was her second Vogue cover. Her first Vogue cover became the best-selling Vogue in history. It sold so well that she was on the cover 2 more times. And each time they put her on the cover in a similar outfit, shot by the same photographer, Albert Watson, which is so funny because they kept trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle and they did it 3 times. So Miss Peggy Dillard has 3 Vogue covers to her credit. And she was one of the first successful models to transition into being a plus model. This photo to me is alive and it's wonderful. This is Kiana Grant. And for those of you that don't know, Kiana Grant was one of the first Black women to have a Maybelline Cosmetics contract. And she did a wonderful interview in the book that was just open-hearted and told all the stories about her life. And she was this girl that got discovered. She went with her cousin who wanted to be a model to a model search. They see Kiana and they make her a model, not the cousin. And she snuck into New York. She was cutting school to go into New York to take bookings while she was modeling. And she didn't think her parents, both of whom I think were teachers, both professionals, were gonna find out that she was working as a model. I love that story. And she's like 15 or 16 getting on the train from New Jersey and going into New York and working every day. So funny. We throw around the term legend and we throw around the term icon a lot. I don't like that. Even though I named the book Iconic Black Women That Revolutionized Fashion, there aren't that many icons in the book, but I did like that because Supreme Models is a play on Supreme of supermodels and blah, blah, blah. But when I say to you that this woman is an icon, when I say to you that Beverly Johnson is a legend, Beverly Johnson is a trailblazing, rule-breaking legend. If it is not for Beverly, there would be no Naomi. If it was not for Beverly, there would be no Veronica. If there was not for Beverly, there'd be no Leah, no Jordan Dunn. Beverly did it first and she did it the best. This is the first Black woman on the cover of American Vogue. This is a woman who, when she asked Eileen Ford to help her get the cover of American Vogue, Eileen Ford, who was the president of probably the most powerful agency in the world at the time, told her she'll never get the cover of Vogue. Beverly Johnson left Ford for Wilhelmina, and she said to Wilhelmina, I want the cover of Vogue. And she got the cover of Vogue. And this was one of the best-selling issues of Vogue ever, to this date. And here is the divine Beverly Johnson. What was amazing about Beverly Johnson was she was a college athlete when she started modeling. She was a swimmer. And people told her that she was too fat because she had an athletic frame. Wasn't an ounce of fat on her, but she had an athletic frame because she was an athlete. There's a wonderful story in the book that I encourage you to read where she talks about the first time she met Ford. She met with Eileen Ford before she signed her. Beverly Johnson walked into the Ford offices and Eileen Ford told her no, that she was too fat. She pointed at her in front of a room full of people and other models, and she said, no, fat, and kept going. It wasn't until Eileen saw her on the cover of Glamour, which Beverly Johnson got freelancing by going to photographers, that Eileen Ford realized her mistake and called her up and said, come to the office. Tea is being spilled. All right, next photo. This is Aya Jones, an exciting new model who is killing it. And of course she's killing it because that face is incredible. But what I love about this photo when I started working on the book, and I should tell you that I came up with the idea to do this book in 2011. And one of the reasons why I came up with this idea to do the book is because I collect art books, right? Books on photography, books on fashion, books on furniture, books on design. And I ordered a book called Vogue Model, The Faces of Fashion. I believe that's the book. And it was all the models that have appeared in British Vogue. And when I got that book the same day, I cracked it open that night and I read it from cover to cover. And there were only 2 Black models in that book. It was Iman and it was Naomi Campbell. And it was a really bad photo of Iman. And I was incensed. This was 2000, I think the book came out in 2010, maybe 2011, because I think I bought it as soon as it came out. The fact that British Vogue, who was the first Vogue to have a Black model on its cover, only put 2 Black models in a book that had over 100 models. And there were several mediocre models in the book that shouldn't have even been in a book about top models. But you leave out Veronica Webb. You leave out Donia Luna, the first Black woman to be on the cover of any Vogue. You leave out Alec Weck. You leave out Jordan Dunn. You leave out all these models that have Beverly Johnson. You leave out all these models that have conquered and changed the face of the world in advertising, and you only put in 2 Black models out of all these models in the book. And that was what made me write Supreme Models. That was the impetus right then and there. And if you go online and you look up that book on Amazon, there is a review of that book that I wrote that night after going through it, where I basically say what's wrong with this book, and I give it 1 star. But about this photo, I chose this photo of Aya because they put her on the cover of a major magazine with braids. Now, in 2021, after the reckoning that fashion went through because of the pandemic and the protests, we're very accustomed to seeing Black models with braids in their hair. But up to a couple of years ago, I would say 2019, that was a no-no. So I put this photo on the cover because I wanted to put braids in the book and I wanted them to be exalted. The divine Cecily Lopez, who has become a friend of mine. Cecily Lopez was, again, Afro-Latina. I think she's Dominican as well. Born in the States, and was that model that always her whole life wanted to be a model. She went after it and she conquered it. And one of the things that's so important about Cecily Lopez is when her career sort of first started, she was one of the Black models that Stephen Meisel shot that were on the cover of the 2008 All Black Vogue, which became the highest selling issue of Vogue Italia ever, and got 3 or 4 reprints. And they haven't done it since. And there have been no more than a handful of Black models on the cover since. And that to me is just a sin and a shame. You do an issue of all Black models and it becomes your best-selling issue to date, and you don't see that there is a space there for diversity and inclusion ongoing, not just a stunt. All right. could tell you 1,000 things about the Elle covers. But what I'm going to try to do is tell you stories that I haven't already told about Elle covers. Elle is like a legendary magazine, but Elle was one of the forerunners in the battle for diversity and inclusion. And when Elle came to the United States in the late 70s, early 80s, Elle forced the hand of Condé Nast. And because Elle was always using Black models on the cover, either by themselves or in doubles or triples, all the other fashion magazines had to follow suit. And so because of Elle, Harper's Bazaar started regularly putting Black models on the cover. Because of Elle, Vogue started regularly or more often than they had been putting Black models on the cover. So Elle is a really important magazine, and this is an issue of South African Elle. And I thought that that was important because I didn't want it to just be American magazines or French magazines or British magazines. I wanted the book to feel global. I wanted the book to feel like it represented people of all races. Well, not all races, because it's a book about Black women, but I wanted people to feel like it represented every country that we possibly could. Okay, let's move on. I could talk about this photo and I could talk about this model for a million years. The model is Beverly Peele. I am obsessed with Beverly Peele. People always want to talk about Naomi being threatened by Tyra Banks. I always want to bring up Beverly Peele because it wasn't Tyra who was the #2 model in the world as far as Black models. It was Miss Beverly Peele with her over 250 covers. Beverly Peele was on every major runway during her career, and she did it. She was the face of Ralph Lauren, Dolce & Gabbana. Beverly Peele was a complete chameleon. Beverly Peele had a walk that rivaled the greatest in the business. She started when she was 14, and I think she got her first cover of Mademoiselle magazine when she was 14. She was an all-star. And for some reason, Naomi wasn't threatened by her when she was the girl that was working almost as much or as well as Naomi and not getting the press for it. And she had a relatively short career, and I think that's because she started so long ago. Oh, but let me tell you about this photo. This photo is by Tiziano Magni, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's an Italian photographer. He is brilliant and genius and amazing. And when I reached out to him about the book, he opened his archive to me in the most beautiful way. And every day I get an email from him, and he was like, I've got this of Naomi, I've got this of Kirsty, I've got this of blah, blah, blah. And he sent me this photo of Beverly, which I hadn't seen, nor was I considering. And this is the photo we used, which is an homage to the great, great Josephine Baker. No, Billie Holiday. Woo! Okay. I don't want to get insane. I'm not going to get too excited. Okay. Here is the thing. This is Daphne Maxwell Reid, who many of us know as the second Aunt Viv on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But what we don't know is that she was a teen model and hugely successful before she became an actress. She is the first Black model to grace the cover of Glamour magazine. She was a Ford girl back in the late 60s, and she is also divine. Talking to her, I got to interview her. And again, please read the book and read the interviews. They are amazing. All the women that allowed me to speak to them tell so many amazing stories. But talking to Daphne, she was like your aunt. She was like your cool aunt that has lived that life. And she just went on and told me these stories. But when I got off the phone with her, I felt like my soul had been fed, because everything she said was about positivity and light and about good and doing good and about having a purpose. And the words of that interview ring in my head to this day. This photo is Loy Samuels. Loy Samuels is a Jamaican model, much like the model that's on the cover, Janelle Williams. There is a gentleman in Jamaica, and his name is, in Kingston, his name is Kingsley. And his life is about traveling across Jamaica and discovering beautiful Jamaican girls for his agency. And then he takes those girls across the globe and places them in other markets. And he literally takes them. He's not sending out cards. He does like trips with like 10 girls. Loy was a model that he discovered at an all-girls school. Loy did did a model competition that he sponsors and lost. The second year she did it again and was Miss Congeniality or something, which isn't what she wanted to do. She sort of had to battle for him because Loy is dark-skinned and she's got super short shaved head. And even in Jamaica, the beauty ideal is a Black woman that's like lighter skin. Loy had to battle to get him to take her with him on the tour that he was doing. She went to Paris, nobody picked her up. She went to London, nobody picked her up. They go to New York, and finally, someone picks her up. And it turned out to be Beth Ann Hardison, who is the legend, who is in the front of the book, and she is in a section of her own called The Godmother. All right. This woman is Ilanka. And Ilanka, to me, there would be no Tyra if Ilanka hadn't did it. And I should have cropped this photo so you didn't see this, you know, how fashion layouts are. It should be just about Ilanka. But God, I have to remember to do that because every time I see that, when I send it out, it makes me crazy. The thing about Ilanka is she changed the business in really significant ways because she opened the business up to this kind of idea of the lighter skinned girl that still had Black features, you know, that still had like a nose and still had full lips, but wasn't too light. And Ilanka killed it on the runway. If you look at old runway footage from like Jenny and Chanel and Chloe and Yves Saint Laurent, you'll see Ilanka on the runway. And at one point, British Vogue, I believe, named her one of the 10 most beautiful girls in the world. Ilanka killed it. And when Ilanka stepped out of the business, who steps in? Tyra Banks, because agencies were literally looking for the next Ilanka. Next. Okay, when I tell you, Veronica Webb is my angel. Veronica Webb is a godsend. Veronica Webb is everything. So Veronica Webb wrote the foreword for Supreme Models. And the first line, which I decided to blow up, is modeling is magic. Veronica is one of the smartest, kindest, most intuitive women I have. She's a natural empath. And she is in Italian Vogue. Here she is on the cover of Italian Vogue. The photo that I just showed you that is next to her foreword is one of the covers we were considering for the cover of the book. This cover is by legendary photographer Albert Watson, who is a genius. I reached out to Albert Watson to get this photo, and he quoted me an astronomical rate. I ended up getting on the phone with him. It was a phone call, and telling him about the project and telling him who was attached to the project. And Albert drastically cut his prices, his rates, to be included in the book. And there are 3 Albert Watson photos in the book. And this is one of my favorites. This is the divine Rashaumba Williams. And when I say to you, Rashaumba is a model's model, Rashaumba is that girl that grew up wanting to be a model. From like 6 years old, when people would ask her, what do you want to be? Rashaumba would be like, I want to be a model. Rashaumba's story, which is also in the book, is so funny because at a certain age, she had like a real job. Like she lived outside of Chicago in like a small town. She had a real job working at like the phone company or something like that, you know, very pedestrian. And she saved up her money and she won. You know how you used to have the green stamps that your mother used to fill the books? She won luggage in a competition and she took that as a sign and she saved up her money, bought a one-way ticket to Paris, ended up with like $150 in her pocket. She packed saltine crackers, Kool-Aid, which is the mix that you put water and sugar in to make a drink, peanut butter and sardines in her luggage, and left for Paris to become a model. She didn't have an agency. She didn't speak French. And within a week of being there, she signed with an agency and she met Yves Saint Laurent and she became one of his cabine models, which was a house model. I love that. I love that story. This is the legendary, the iconic Naomi Sims. This is the first Naomi. Naomi Sims was a model in the late 60s into the 70s. And she was one of the first models to monetize her, to switch gears. She wrote books about beauty and she wrote books about health. But what some of you may know is that she started her own wig line. And what I love about her wig line is she took a regular white woman's wig, put it in the oven, baked it, and that simulated the texture of black hair. And she became a multi-millionaire from her wig company. The other important thing about Naomi Sims is that she is the first Black woman to appear on the cover of Life magazine, which was an iconic magazine at the time. But she's also the first Black model to appear on the cover of Ladies' Home Journal. And now, you know, in 2021, we think, who cares about Ladies' Home Journal? But when she appeared on the cover, that magazine was in 14 million homes. 14 million homes got a magazine with the photo of a Black woman with natural hair on the cover, dark skin. It changed the game. She is the first Black supermodel. All right, so we're getting to the point where these are like sort of my favorite photos in the book. And then after this one, don't leave because I'm going to open the floor up to a Q&A, but we cannot talk about Supreme Models without talking about, in my opinion, the #1 model ever. I don't care about race or anything. I think Naomi Campbell is the #1 model ever. And I am a model lover. I love models from like the 50s, like Susie Parker and Jean Shrimpton and Verushka and Twiggy. I love models from the 70s like Lisa Taylor. I love Donielle Luna for what she did for fashion. But Naomi Campbell changed the game. A little girl from London became the top model in the world. And to me, that amazes me. So we'll talk about why this is in the book is really important, because this is the layout of the book. You're gonna get here you get the where the model was born, and you get the birth date and the years that she worked. And then you get how I decided someone was a top model. It was the 5 biggest clients and the 5 biggest magazines they worked for. And then you get like a little bio of the high points of their career. This photo is by Patrick Demarchelier, I believe, who was so kind to me with this book. He drastically cut his rates to be included in the book. This photo is important because first, it's the only exposed boob in the book. And we were like, and Abrams didn't know if they wanted that photo in the book. And it was like a thing. We kept going back and forth about it. But I think this photo is incredible. But what I love most about this photo is that it is the cover of Vogue Paris. And side note, Naomi Campbell went to Yves Saint Laurent, who was like her dad, and bitched to him because she hadn't gotten a cover yet. And he threatened to pull his advertising from Paris Vogue if they didn't put her on the cover. And that's how Naomi got her first cover. But I think that was her second Vogue cover. All right. This is an important photo because Christy Turlington is my angel. I could talk to you all day long about Christy Turlington, but I won't. Christy Turlington, I worked for Christy Turlington in the late 90s, stuffing envelopes at her skincare company, and Christy and I became friends. And the reason that Naomi Campbell is sort of in the book is because Christy reached out to her to ask Naomi to write the foreword. And Naomi said she was going to write the foreword, but then she dropped out at the last minute. But I had asked Veronica Webb to write the preface. It was going to be foreword by Naomi, preface by Veronica, introduction by me. And then it ended up not being a preface, and that was what happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is Supreme Models, Iconic Black Women Who Revolutionized Fashion, and that is stories from behind the cover.
Well, the word supreme is quite accurate for this group of women. Marcellas, I have several questions for you. I also want to open it up to our audience today, so please type them in the Q&A or the chat box. First off, I'm curious. You said you had the idea for this book back in 2011. Obviously, it was written a little bit after that. How did the book come about? How did it come to fruition?
So in 2011, I had the idea for the book, and I just picked up the phone and started. And because I collect art books, I sort of saw other art books that had talked about models or talked about the subjects. But what those books were missing was they didn't talk to the model. They talked to art directors and photographers about the model, but they didn't interview the model. Well, having been a model from like 1995 to 2000, I knew that all these women had incredible stories because I had crazy stories from being a model. And so what I did was I picked up the phone and started calling models that I knew. And there was a model who didn't make the cut in the book. Her name is Shakara Ladard. She did Sports Illustrated. She's a Victoria's Secret model. I called her, and she had just had a baby. And I did an interview with her, which I recorded, and I could hear the baby in the background cooing. And I knew I had something there because even though Shakara and I were friends, I didn't know all these stories. The second person I called was Tamiko Frazier, who's the first Black model to have a Maybelline contract. And her interview just blew me away. She was candid. She was real. She was unguarded. She told so many truths. And I urge you to read that interview because it will change your mind about modeling and what Black girls have to go through to be a model. And that was when I knew I had a book. And for a while, the book was at Toshin, and then they passed on it. And then the book was at a literary agency called Sterling Lord Literaristic that did the Roxanne Lowitt book. And I thought the book was going to go because I had an editor there, and we worked on it for almost a year. And then they passed on it. And I was done because I was like, okay, there's not a market for this. Nobody wants this. And I didn't know anything about publishing. And I'll try to make the story really quick because I want to get to the open the floor for people. So my hosting agent had other talent that had written books, and she sent the book proposal to Penguin, and Penguin passed on it. So one day I was having a fight with her over the phone, and I was like, why am I not working? What happened with the book? And she actually said to me, I sent that book to everybody and nobody was interested. And I hung up the phone because I didn't want to unleash a string of expletives. And I went to Facebook and I typed a Facebook post. Does anybody know a literary agent? I have a book idea. And one of my oldest friends was like, my cousin's a literary agent. What's the deal? He introduced me to her. I sent her the proposal, which was like War and Peace. I signed with her a month later. 3 months to the day, we had a book deal.
Wow.
And it was a bidding war for Supreme Models.
So wonderful.
I'll tell you something else. Several people along the way told me that nobody would buy a book about Black women.
Well, you proved them wrong. And you've put together an absolutely beautiful book. I'm curious, Marcellas, if you would briefly just take us through what, how would I say, there's no average day, but a day in the life of one of these women. Like, what might it entail? Including, a shoot, getting ready for it, et cetera. What would give us an example of a typical day of a top model?
I think my favorite story in the book is Tamiko Frazier had a Maybelline, a global makeup campaign with Christy Turlington, like one of the biggest black faces on the earth. And she still wanted to do shows. So she had to go to Paris and do shows. So she goes to her agency, she gets the list every day, and she has to walk across Paris, and she has to stand in line at the shows. She has to show off her book to the designers and their team. Then she has to walk for the team. This is literally one of the top models in the world at that time. And you still have to go through and do the work. You still have to be humble enough to understand that you still have to compete for every single job. So they check in with their agent first thing in the morning. If they're not working, they're going to meet clients. If it's show season and they're following the shows, they do London, they do Paris, they do Milan, they come back, they do New York. And you have to go to those castings unless a designer specifically requests you to do the show. And some of those girls, especially in a market like Paris, you could go on a casting, you could have 25 appointments in a day. And it's just literally trying to make it through as many of those as you can to get that job. And then if you get that job, you could have 20 castings, you could have 20 shows in a day. And you're literally like running from show to show to show to show to show. And I think there's something that's so like beautiful and exciting about that end of fashion,
I'm gonna go to some questions here that are written in. We have a question if transgender models are included in your book.
Okay, this book, I started this book in 2011 when they weren't really part of the conversation, but I did consider using a model, and her name, please excuse me, her name escapes me right now, Tracy Norman. But the thing was, Tracy Norman, you have to have 5 big designers that you work for and 5 big magazines that you work for. Tracy's career was not that long and was not that impactful on fashion. But I wanted to put her in the book because she was one of the first to break through. Then the book doesn't, it goes through all these iterations. I started working on the book in 2018. We weren't having those conversations yet about transgendered models, and there were no Black ones other than Tracy Norman. So there wasn't any to put in the book. So yes, there was Andrej. There were a couple of white models who were transgender that had broken through, but there wasn't a Black one yet. But it was really important for me to put members of the LGBTQI community in the book. So there are lesbians in the book. And then I did put plus models in the book because that was also important to me because plus models have broken through. And I tried desperately to put Marquita Pring, who was one of my favorite models in the book, but I couldn't clear her photos. They were so expensive. But Precious Lee, who is now a supermodel, is in the book. And as I said to you, Peggy Dillard, who is the first model to transition from being a non-plus model to being a plus model, is in the book as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mary Beth asks, could you envision a documentary on this subject?
Mary Beth, I wish I could announce something, but I will say this, I am very close to that, and I am partnered with a supermodel who is in the book. And that is all I will say about that. But expect an announcement any day.
So a wonderful tease there. I'm curious, what is the most, in writing this book and looking at the careers and the stories of all of these women, what is the most unexpected thing that you learned along the way?
The sisterhood. Everybody hears these stories about Naomi versus Tyra, or they hear these stories about how cutthroat the book is. Can I tell you something? I interviewed not all the interviews made the book, because at the end of the day, it's a photography book, it's an art book. But I interviewed almost 40 women. And every time I asked those women who was their favorite model, they would say Naomi. There were a couple of Imans. There were a couple of Alec Wex, because of Alec Wex, how she changed fashion. But across the board, I'd say 95% were Naomi. And if those models knew Naomi or had worked with her, they all had incredible stories about Naomi. Naomi gave me a booking. Naomi introduced me to Azzedine Alaya. Naomi did this. Naomi did that. And there's so many stories of the sisterhood of the Black model that I love in this book. And it's something you don't hear about enough, because you always hear about the rivalry, or you always hear about there's only space for one. But the sisterhood, and they love each other. I'm going to tell you a real quick story. Karen Alexander is in the book. I wish I could show you her photo. It's a beautiful photo by Herb Ritz. Karen Alexander I interviewed, and Karen Alexander is a star. She is a goddess, cover of Vogue, like everything. When I told her that Peggy Dillard wasn't in the book, because at that time she wasn't, Karen Alexander said to me, take me out of the book and put Peggy Dillard in. And she was serious. And I was like, I will not. This is my book. I decide who gets to be in this book.
Wow, what a wonderful thing to learn about this group of women. I'm also curious. We read a lot about the designer having a muse, and these women that you're profiling in your book have really impacted both fashion and society in a tremendous way. I'm curious if you would give us an example of a model who became a muse and had that partnership and that connection with the designer, where they were really inspiring what was going to come down the runways.
Well, you have to read Rashaumba Williams, because she talks about that. She talks about the relationship between designers. Because I actually asked her who was her favorite designer, and she got like crazy and emotional. You could hear it in her voice, and she was like, they fed my soul. These were like my uncles. She's like Gianfranco Ferré, Yves Saint Laurent. She's like, how can you choose? And for me, I always go back to the relationship between Halston, who is probably the greatest American designer ever, and his relationship to Pat Cleveland and Beth Ann Hardison, because Halston really used Black models in the same manner in which he used Caucasian models. He was a lover of women, no matter what, just their beauty, but also their personality. He surrounded himself with models who had personalities. So there's Tookie Smith, there's Alva Chen, there's all these great legendary 70s models who had careers because of Halston. And then I also think of Yves Saint Laurent. I mean, imagine like a 16, 17-year-old Naomi crying to Yves Saint Laurent and going, Christy's getting covers and I'm not getting any covers. And imagine Yves Saint Laurent picking up what was probably a beautiful phone and going, look, Paris Vogue, put my daughter on the phone. You know, put my daughter on the cover. You know, that's legendary. And those are the relationships, the designer to muse. Veronica Webb and Isaac Mizrahi, Veronica Webb and Azzedine. You know, these women inspire them. They bring their clothes to life.
So incredible. I do have another question, and that is, from the time that you handed in your draft to the publisher till now, have you noticed any young talents popping up whom you say, wow, you know, I'm definitely going to put them in the abridged edition in 5 years?
No.
Or a second edition.
One of the things that I love the most about Supreme Models is I took a leap of faith, because I am a model fan. And I put girls in the book, and you always refer to models as girls, no matter how old or young they are. I put girls in the book that weren't quite top models yet, but I thought had the capacity to break through and get to the next level. So if you open this book, you're gonna see Delone is in this book. And Delone just got her first series of Vogue covers. And Ducky Thought is in this book. And Ducky Thought is now the face of L'Oreal. You're going to see Ajax Ding. You're going to see Teresa Hayes is killing it right now on the runway. There's so many girls that are in this book that have lived up to what I thought dreamed their potential could be, and are now campaign girls. Leomi Anderson, the Victoria's Secret model. There's so many girls in this book that weren't quite supers, weren't quite tops, but I thought this girl has that thing. Precious Lee, the plus model that I was just speaking of. Precious Lee, I met on a plane coming from doing Old Navy. And all of a sudden she's like on the cover of like Italian Vogue, and she's a muse to Stephen Meisel. So yes, I am planning a second edition, and I am planning, that edition to be expanded and big and have more models and be bigger in size. And I will have a lot of new models because so many girls are breaking through every day now. But there are lots of models in the book that broke through in the last 2 years that the book has been out.
Marcellas, we're just about at time, and we could talk for hours, and there's so much content here. I'm curious, what's next for you?
Well, that is a very good question. Yes, I'm a sensitive bitch. Okay, so guys, I'm so honored to have been asked by the National Arts Club to do this talk. You have no idea. And so I am premiering my new book. I sold my second book during a pandemic. I wrote my second book during the pandemic. The second book is Supreme Actresses, Iconic Black Women Who Revolutionized Hollywood. That's the incredible Viola Davis on the cover, and that is the incredible Lupita Nyong'o on the back cover. This is the first time I'm showing anybody the back cover of the book. I put my heart and my soul into this one like I did with the first one. And I just hope that everybody loves it as much as I love it. And this book, I worried that it wouldn't be as beautiful as Supreme Models because models, are these goddess Valkyries. But this book is beautiful in its scope. It's Josephine Baker, it's Diane Carroll, it's Lena Horne, it's Ethel Waters, it's Dorothy Dandridge, it's the new queens like Viola and Lupita and Regina King and Taraji Henson and Tracy Ross, and there's tons of interviews, and the incredible Gabrielle Union wrote the foreword, and it's beautiful and it's powerful, and I got through that without crying. I teared up.
Yes, you did. And you're going to be presenting that live at the National Arts Club on October 8th. So if the audience watching would like to attend, there will be information. If you signed up for today, you will get information about that. Marcellas, I just want to thank you. Thank you for shining a light on this extraordinary group of women. They're also inspiring. These stories are all so wonderful and so rich. And we can't wait to hear your next presentation. I want to thank our audience today. I want to thank you for the great questions as well. And I just want to, again, remind you that this has been a production of the National Arts Club. And for more information on the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm David Zyla. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.